The brake discs on a serious performance car, the kind that cost as much as a second-hand car all by themselves, are the road-going descendants of a Formula One disc that glows under heavy braking at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature of molten lava, running, quite literally, a few centimeters from your wheel. And here's the paradox that runs through this whole story, the thing almost nobody tells you. That Formula One brake, the finest, most extreme stopping device humanity has ever built, would be useless on your car. Worse than useless. Dangerous. Fit it to a normal road car and, on a cold morning, for the first few streets, it would barely stop you at all. So the engineers who wanted that F1 magic on the road couldn't just bolt it on. They had to take the idea and tame it with a piece of chemistry that borders on alchemy. So, 3 questions for the next few minutes. 1. How does a brake disc run at the temperature of lava, hundreds of times a race, without simply melting or warping? 2. Why would the greatest brake in motorsport be genuinely dangerous on your commute? And 3. How can a set of these brakes cost £15,000 and then shatter because you drove through a puddle? Stick around, because the answer runs from molten lava through a vacuum furnace to the brake pedal under your own foot. Let's start with what a brake actually does, because it's not what most people think. A brake doesn't make energy disappear, it converts it. Your moving car is full of kinetic energy, and to stop, that energy has to go somewhere. So the brakes turn it into heat by friction, by rubbing 2 surfaces together, hard. Every brake on Earth, from a bicycle to a jumbo jet, does exactly this. It turns motion into heat. Which means the real challenge of a brake isn't making the heat. Making heat is easy, the challenge is surviving it. And this is where ordinary brakes hit a wall. Think of a steel disc like a frying pan on a hob. Brake once, it warms up. Brake again, hotter. Keep braking down a mountain pass, or lap after lap on a track, and the steel gets so hot it starts to lose the plot. It distorts, the friction drops off. The pedal goes soft under your foot, and the car just won't slow down as it should. Engineers call it brake fade. Drivers call it terrifying. Now scale that up to Formula One. A modern F1 car brakes from 300 kilometers an hour to a crawl in a couple of seconds, pulling 5 times the force of gravity, and it does that 800 times over a single race. A steel disc wouldn't just fade. It would cook itself into scrap before half distance. So back in the 1980s, Formula One did something drastic. It threw steel away entirely and reached for a material that laughs at heat, which would destroy metal. And that decision is the seed of everything sitting behind the wheels of today's supercars. The material they chose is carbon, specifically carbon fiber baked into a solid disc of pure carbon. Engineers call it carbon-carbon, and it has 2 magical properties. First, it's astonishingly light. An F1 brake disc weighs under a kilogram, where a steel one is a lump. Second, and this is the strange part, the hotter it gets, the better it grips. Where a steel disc gives up as it heats, carbon does the opposite. At full racing temperature, its grip nearly doubles compared to iron. Heat isn't the enemy of a carbon brake. Heat is its friend. So carbon beats steel. Problem solved? Not quite, because now you've got a disc that wants to run blisteringly hot, and heat that extreme brings its own nightmare. Push a disc past 1,000 degrees, hundreds of times a race, and you have to get that heat out, or the disc quite literally bakes itself apart. The solution is drilled right into it, hundreds upon hundreds of tiny ventilation holes running through the disc, forcing cooling air through its very core. And the numbers here are gorgeous. A modern F1 disc has more than 1,000 cooling holes, each one shaped by airflow simulation to pull heat out at exactly the right rate. To see how far that's come back, in 2002, when Michael Schumacher was winning titles, the disc had just 72 to over 1,000 in 2 decades. All to solve one problem: shift the heat or die. So now we have a light disc, gripping hard, cooling itself with 1,000 tiny lungs. It sounds perfect. And here's where the whole story turns on its head. Here's the catch nobody expects. That incredible carbon brake only works when it's hot, and it needs a shockingly narrow, high window of temperature to do its job. Get it up past 300 or 400 degrees and it's magnificent. But below that cold, the grip collapses. A cold carbon brake barely bites at all. On a racetrack, that's fine. Drivers deliberately warm the brakes on the formation lap, weaving and dabbing the pedal, and once hot, they stay hot. But now imagine that same brake on your car on a frosty morning. You reverse off the drive, roll up to the first junction, press the pedal, and almost nothing happens because the disc is stone cold. You'd sail straight through the giveaway. That is why, and this is the heart of the whole video, you cannot simply put Formula One brakes on a road car. The greatest brake in the world is a prima donna. It's an Olympic sprinter whose electric once warmed up and useless for catching the bus. Brilliant on the track, a liability on the school run. So the engineers faced a genuine puzzle. How do you keep carbon's gifts, the lightweight, the fade resistance, the love of heat, but build something that also works stone cold, in the rain, in traffic, serviced once a year by someone who is definitely not a racing driver? The answer is almost alchemical. You start with a carbon skeleton, carbon fiber, formed into the shape of a disc, full of microscopic pores. Then you put it in a furnace, and you flood it with molten silicon, heated past 1400 degrees. And something wonderful happens. The liquid silicon soaks into the carbon and reacts with it, chemically, forming a brand new material in the gaps. Silicon carbide, a ceramic so hard it's just short of diamond. You end up with carbon fibers for strength and lightness, wrapped in a tough ceramic armor that fills every pore. This is the carbon ceramic brake, and notice the name has changed. The F1 disc is carbon-carbon. Your supercar's disc is carbon ceramic. They're cousins, not twins, and the ceramic cousin is the one that behaves. It keeps most of carbon's magic, about half the weight of iron, superb resistance to fade, and it doesn't rust. But crucially, it also works when it's cold. It'll stop you on that frosty morning without drama. That taming took the idea out of the pit lane and put it on the road. The first road car to get it was the Porsche 911 GT2 back in 2001. Ferrari followed with the Enzo a year later. From there, it spread Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, fast Audis, even electric cars. But taming the wild carbon brake didn't make it cheap, or, as we'll see, foolproof, because these things have a temper of their own and it can cost you the price of a small car. Let's talk about that price, because it's eye-watering. On a new Porsche, ticking the carbon ceramic box is an $8,000 to $10,000 option. And if you ever wear them out and have to replace them, you can be looking at $15,000 for brakes. And here's the cruel twist. That very hardness, that ceramic toughness hides a weakness: thermal shock. Picture a track day. You've been hammering the brakes. The discs are searingly hot. You drive off the circuit and roll through a puddle of cold water. The surface of that scorching ceramic disc cools and contracts in an instant, while the core stays hot and the sudden mismatch can crack it. One puddle, £15,000, gone. It's such a real risk that Porsche now quietly advises against using its ceramic brakes for serious, repeated track days. The wear and the replacement costs simply aren't worth it, and still fits plain iron discs to some of its hardest track cars. Let that sink in. For the toughest use, the lesser brake is sometimes the smarter one. And now the honest bit that the brochures skate over. On a public road, at legal speeds, carbon ceramic brakes do not stop your car any shorter. They can't. Because the thing that actually decides how fast you stop isn't the disc, it's the grip of your tires. Once the tire is at its limit, a better disc changes nothing. So what are you really buying for all that money? 3 things. Brakes that won't fade when you punish them lap after lap. A big drop in weight exactly where it helps the car turn, and discs that essentially last for years without rusting or wearing. On a racetrack, worth every penny. On the daily commute, you're mostly buying bragging rights and clean wheels. For 99% of driving, humble iron discs, which work cold and cost a fraction, are honestly the better tool. Where's it heading? The old cold weather weakness is fading, thanks to clever new ceramic surface coatings that give strong bite even from cold. And there's a bigger shift coming from an unexpected direction: electric cars. A heavy EV does most of its slowing with regenerative braking, using its motor, which means the actual friction discs are used far less. The brake that had to survive lava may, in the electric age, spend most of its life barely getting warm. So why do your brakes copy a Formula One design? Because in the 1980s, F1 proved that a disc made of carbon could shrug off heat that turns steel to scrap. That was the breakthrough. But the racing version was a temperamental genius, magnificent when glowing at 1,000 degrees, hopeless when cold. To bring that genius to the road, engineers reforged it in molten silicon, wrapped it in near-diamond ceramic, and civilized it. Your performance car's brakes aren't a Formula One brake. They're the road-going cousin of one. The same brilliant idea, tamed enough to survive a puddle, a cold morning, and you. Not the same disc, but without that glowing F1 disc leading the way, it would never have existed at all. So, tell me in the comments, has your car got iron discs or the fancy carbon ceramic ones, and have you ever actually felt brake fade on a long hill? I'd love to know. And the loop I want to pull next time. If electric cars slow themselves with their motors, are traditional brakes slowly becoming emergency-only parts discs that barely ever get used? That's the next video. Subscribe, and I'll see you there.